Hi! So this is how to make a simple elasticated skirt, and I'm going to be using my measurements, and you can use your measurements, which means it should fit anybody of any size, and it's really simple to do. So to start off, I'm using a polycotton fabric, which is really cheap and really easy to work with. One thing to note though is that it doesn't have any stretch to it. So I started with my measurements and measured around my widest part, so basically around my hips, and that's 97 centimeters. So I cut the width of my fabric 120 centimeters, and that extra 23 centimeters is called ease. Basically it's just wiggle room so I can actually put the skirt on and take it off again. So the more fabric you use, the wider your fabric is, the fuller the skirt will appear, and the less fabric you use, the tighter the skirt will be. But because this doesn't have any stretch to it, it's important to make sure that you have a decent amount of ease added to it. Then I measured from my waist downwards and decided I wanted the skirt to be 47 centimeters. So I've actually cut it 50 centimeters, and those extra 3 centimeters are going to be what I use to hem the bottom of the skirt. Now, because this is a polycotton, it's a little bit thin, which means it's a little bit sheer. So what I've done is I've just basically doubled it up. I just folded a piece over, used 2 pieces basically. But if you're using a thicker fabric, then you wouldn't need to do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually to hem the bottom of the skirt. Basically it's just a rectangle at the moment, so I'm just going to hem the bottom of the rectangle, and it's so much easier to do whilst it's still a rectangle, because you're basically just sewing a straight line on a straight line rather than trying to hem a skirt which is a curved line. So that's a top tip. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew just a simple running stitch all the way along, about 3 centimeters down, because it's going to be an elasticated waist, and my elastic is about 2.5 centimeters or about 1 inch wide. So I'm going to sew about 3 centimeters. So this is where the kind of little tunnel thing where the elastic is going to run through, and that's going to end up being the waist. So because I've just folded 2 pieces, well, I've folded 1 piece over, so it's now 2 layers thick, I'm just going to sew 1 straight line along. But if you were just using 1 piece of fabric, what you need to do is first fold the top bit over about 3 centimeters and then sew it. Those are the first 2 steps, and it's just basically simple running stitch. So that's what I'm going to do now. So to do the hem, I'm just folding over once, and then folding over again, and then just going to do a simple running stitch all the way along. So I've hemmed the bottom of my fabric, and I've also created the tunnel section at the top where the elastic's going to go. So that's in this plain pink fabric, but I found this other fabric which is kind of a sheer, gauzy, pink, polka dot, fun fabric. So I'm going to make this a 2-layered skirt, so I'm going to put this over the top of the plain pink. So this is just the same rectangle that I cut out before, only I haven't hemmed the bottom of this because I quite like the unhemmed look for the bottom of it. But for the top of it, I'm going to attach the top of this to the top of this. And this is they're still rectangles, I still haven't turned them into a full skirt yet, because it's just a lot easier to do everything when it's still a rectangle. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay. So I know it's quite difficult to see, but this is actually the waistband or the top of the skirt, but this is the back, so this is the wrong side of the fabric. And what I've done is I've attached the outer layer of fabric to the top, and this here is the stitch line from the waistband. So this is what I sewed before, and this is where the elastic's going to go. So what I need to make sure is when I attach this piece of fabric on top, I sew beneath this line, on top of it or beneath it, because if I sew above it, that's where the elastic's going to go, and I'll end up sewing through my hole where my elastic's going to go. So I've just pinned it all the way along, and I'm just going to pin this down, and then I'm going to sew basically pretty much on top of where I sewed before. And so this is going to be the front of the skirt, and so I'm going to change the colour of my thread to white because it's going to be visible anyway. I thought the white would work with the white polka dots. Okay, so I've now sewn it all together, so you should just be able to see the stitch line there, and this is the front of the skirt, and then on the back it's not quite as neat, but you can see that I basically just stitched two pieces together, and it's a little bit scruffy, so I'm going to go trim just along this scruffy edge here on the back, but it's on the back so no one will see it, and this is the waistband now. Okay, so I've sewed my two pieces of fabric together. So now I've got my rectangle that's going to become the skirt, and the next step is to insert the elastic, which is going to go around the waist. So we created the tube at the top of the waistband to put the elastic in, so all we need to do now is just feed it through, which can be a bit fiddly, but sometimes it helps if you attach a safety pin or something, which you can then feel and kind of work through with your hands. So the length of the elastic needs to be the same size as your waist. So I measured my waist at about 74 centimeters. That's my narrowest part. So it's actually higher up than most trousers and clothes will actually sit, because they usually sit more around your hips. But it's the narrowest part, because it's elasticated, you'll find it just kind of sits on your narrowest part anyway. So it's 74 centimeters, and that's how long I cut my elastic, which you will find is obviously shorter than how big we've made the skirt, because I cut this to be 120 centimeters, so it's quite a bit shorter, but that's what it's supposed to be, that's fine. So when I feed my elastic through, when it comes out the other end, what I want to do is just pin that in place, hold it in place whilst I feed the rest of the elastic through, just to make sure that I don't actually lose my elastic inside my skirt. But it's not hard, so that's what I'm going to do next. Okay. Now that I've inserted the elastic, you can see the waistband is taking shape and it's starting to look more like a skirt. So the last thing really that we need to sew is just around the one open edge that we still have. So I've put my right sides together. So these are the right sides and they're facing each other. And so you can see these are the wrong sides. Basically, the really messy, horrible bits that you don't want anyone to see. And I'm just going to sew, again, a simple running stitch, just straight down from the top to the bottom, going through the elastic all the way down to the bottom. And that'll sew the skirt together.